Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
BIMThoughts, get your BIMThoughts, get them now. Wasn't that like a yum, eat 'em up yum thing? I don't remember. Do you remember?
No, maybe I'm too
Eat
young.
'em up yum. Oh, fish heads, roly-poly fish heads. Fish heads, eat 'em up yum. Yeah, that's where I got that. Welcome to BIMThoughts, everybody. It is BIMThoughts time. And with this crazy stuff that's going around, we thought that we would get together and talk about working remotely and what you should be worried about working remotely, how you can make it more efficient, and what we've learned over time of working remotely. I have been working remotely now for 3 years, so I think I got it all figured out, but I don't. Carl, you just started working remotely full time.
That's right.
And Dana, this is your first foray probably in working remotely.
No, actually, I mean, I've had some gigs where I could work part-time here and there, but it was never like a full-time you work from home. Like when I was a consultant,
Right.
Carl can, I'm sure, attest to this. I would go to offices maybe Monday and then I'd be at home on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I am a huge fan of my house and my dog who's making noise, and
Yeah, that's his job.
I have a nice roof terrace, so I really enjoy being at home. And I was joking with my boss that he's gonna have a hard time getting me back to the office.
Yeah, probably. All right. So, what challenges have you faced this week now that you're working remotely full time?
Well, so I guess it's been 2 weeks now. We're
Yeah,
actually
2 weeks.
yeah.
Right.
So
That's my
tomorrow.
first challenge. I don't know what day it is.
Yeah,
That is a big challenge.
It is a challenge keeping track of the days, especially when you're at home. Yesterday, I was like, holy crap, it's Wednesday already, right?
Mhm.
Like the time just flies by when you don't have to commute and the whole thing. It's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, when you're having fun.
Exactly. Just rolling out of bed.
The time is the biggest challenge.
Yes.
Because just as we were mentioning, we don't know what day of the week it is. Stroll in, turn on the computer, read an email at 7 in the morning, think, okay, I'm going to get some coffee and get going. And then at 10 o'clock, you notice that you haven't got your coffee yet. You haven't, finished everything. You just get sucked in. 7:30 at night, Janice comes in and says, hey, it's time to be done work. And for me, that's one of the hardest parts is that I don't want it to seem like I'm a workaholic unless my boss is listening, in which case I never stop working. But the idea is that you're always in front of the computer. Everything's kind of there. It's very hard to not have that separation, that time to start. When you're going to an office, you get up, you go outside, you get in a car, you go to the office or get in your bus, or if you're the polar bear, you ride your bike.
Right.
And then there's a definite end time. 5 o'clock comes, you punch your card and you go back home. For me anyways, that doesn't happen at home. So you certainly have to have that schedule, and that seems to be one of the things that many people talk about, because remind me later to talk about all of everybody's advice for working at home, because there's lots of that too, as this podcast will attest.
Yes.
Well, so you guys don't have a hard start and end time, Carl? Is it kind of like you can just, maybe you're having a rough morning, you start working at 10, nobody's going to be looking over your shoulder kind of thing? Or is it that it's just easier for you to work from home, would you say?
Well, for me, particularly with BIMTrack, is I'm the only one of me in the office. So I'm not in Quebec, so I'm not in the Quebec City office or the Montreal office. So there is no office for me to go into. So I work from home. The other thing that sort of plays into that time role is a very large portion of the company are all on Eastern time. So they're sort of in and out before I get there. So, well, you're right. There is no sort of hard and fast that you must start at, 8 o'clock and be done at 5. There's an expectation people start between 7 and 9, and they finish between 4 and 6, and everybody kind of is around, which I think is a fairly standard way that people that work remotely kind of have that ability. But it's more sort of the I don't know. It just kind of leads to that, and we also do some clients that work overseas in other spots. So sometimes I'll have a 6 or uh, thankfully nothing later than that, 6 in the morning sort of call or a late evening call. It's sort of early in the morning in Australia, so it can certainly be a little bit of anything based on that. And that's the global world we live in now, I guess.
Yeah, I would say we have a lot of time zones represented, mostly in the US, but we have representation, at least in the support role that I'm in. We at least try to have one in every time zone. So I actually do have a hard start and end time, and I try to keep to those hours because I like my personal time. But I will say, no, it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard to just kind of stop working, especially when you're getting into something that, it's like, oh, I just want to finish this, or I want to get to a good stopping point. It's not like you have to jump into your car or on the metro or, like the polar bear on its bike and go home at some point and you're already there. Right. So
Right.
yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
And we're not all Paul Aubin either, who can work twice as fast as everybody else.
And go everything in fast
Where
forward.
his Aubin hour
right?
is a half hour. So.
I would say that my largest challenge, especially in being in a large firm, has been the migration to the projects that weren't on the cloud already. So we do utilize the cloud, especially when we're doing cross office work, but not everything was on the cloud yet, and so we've really been pushing to move everything up onto the cloud, the BIM 360 cloud, that is.
Yes.
And it's been quite a bit of work, and it's definitely pointed out some challenges within the interface that maybe weren't as apparent before, but that.
You know what we're going to do for our BIM thinkers? And I'm volunteering telling us to do this, is let's get together all of the challenges we have as BIM managers with the 360 cloud and the user interface. And then I'll see about getting one of the BIM 360 people at Autodesk to be on BIMThoughts. And we can let him know. And then he can let us know, or she, that nice person, can let us know what's coming up on the public roadmap to make it even better. How's that?
I like it. Always the idea man.
And I think that's where we're really going, right? Because we don't, first off, know when this is going to end. And I think also my dad was kind of pointing out to me this the other day before we even started working remote full time, that this is really going to present a shift in the way people work, in the way that people looking at work.
Right.
Not just necessarily because they don't want to come into contact with other people and their germs, but just because of the way that we're kind of being forced to move everything to a remote lifestyle, if you will.
One of the things that's happening in this era of remote working is people who wouldn't normally work remote are starting to work remote or are working remote. Like in our office, all 400 people now are working remote because that's what we're doing. We're doing our social isolation, and we are, or what is it? Is that what it's called?
Distance.
Social distancing.
Yeah.
We're doing our social
I think
distancing
we should refer to it as physical distancing, because we're still being social, right, Bill? I mean, we're still talking, me, Carl, you, we're still having the BIM thoughts, we're being social, but we're physically not together.
Right. We're 6'1" away or more.
We got it.
Than everybody. But I think the challenge is they're doing the work like they're supposed to. They're starting on time. Ending on time is not as important to me as starting on time, because everybody knows in our office if you're on time because you're green in Teams or Skype, and you can see when people start. But also keeping track of the hours you work. Don't just write down, oh, I worked 8 hours today. And if you goof off or get sidetracked for an hour watching YouTube, then put that hour in at the end, so that you get the hours that you're getting paid for to work. Because If it doesn't get any better, it's going to get a whole lot worse. And you don't want to be that person that's going to be on the wrong side of that. You want to make sure that you are right there in their face, getting the stuff done. How can I help you? These are the things I'm doing that are making it better. Here's how I can help. Those kinds of things. Be in the forefront of all of that stuff. Because if you're not, you're going to be forgotten.
How do you combat the challenges of working from home? Like, do you always share your video, right? You have Bill in
I
his
always turn on
office
the
from
camera now.
home, always turn on. So you're getting that interaction that you might not before. If you were just working from home
Right.
because you were sick, you probably
Always
wouldn't
turn
turn
on
on
the
the video.
camera. If you have a question, send the chat to somebody with your question. If you have an intranet like we do, we use Synthesis as our intranet platform. I'm posting videos now on how to do different things. I just posted one today on, and you guys may not know this one. This is really cool. If in Outlook, because we all use Outlook, right?
Oh, well, also.
Yeah. You in your calendar, if you right click on one of the times, where it says the time down vertically. If you right click on this and pick change time zone, you can add 2 other time zones to your calendar. So now I have 3 time zones listing in my calendar: Pacific, Eastern, and Central. So I can say, oh yeah, right now it's 5:48 in Eastern, or 6:48 Eastern time, 5:48 Central time.
Well, and I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards what my dad said about this shift, about the way
Mm-hmm.
people work. And I know you want people there at the right time. But what about people like Carl, who's in a different time zone, right? And I think we're going to see more and more people working from home in different time zones and collaborating in different ways. Does that mean that he needs to be in the office at 8:30 EST?
I start earlier now because of time zone things. I adjusted my schedule so that I can continue to work from home.
Well, that's because everything cool happens on the Eastern time zone anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, I think your dad is correct that things are going to change, but they're not changed yet. And so we need to adjust to that. So if our office is on if my main office was in Eastern time, I would be up at I would start work at 8 Eastern, because I would, especially if I was the only one in Pacific time. It doesn't make sense to punish the rest of the company for me starting 2 hours late. I need to adjust my schedule to fit the schedule of the job that I have. So maybe I'm a little bit weird in thinking that, but to me right now, with the way things are evolving, we need to make that evolution happen and follow with that evolution. Yes, we can lead in some things, but I don't think we should lead in things that are going to cause disruption. We should lead in things that are going to make things better.
And so your videos, I'm sure they make things better.
Videos make things better. So I create 1 to 2 videos a day and post it on our intranet on how to do different things. Like that one that I just said about how to add time zones. That video was, I think it's 3 minutes long. Took me a half hour to produce it, to go through it 3 times because I screwed up a lot, edit it, and pop it up there. I've created videos on how to make RDP faster, how to diagnose your VPN connection. So I'm doing those kinds of videos because those are the things I know. Those are the things that make me the expert at my firm. You have things that make you the expert at your firm. Share that knowledge. Share. You may come up with a great way to do keynotes, for example. And if it's a different way and it's a lot better and people are excited about it, share that with the rest of the firm. Show your value to the firm. You can share what you've learned, make everyone faster, and you're within the sight of the people that are making the decisions. That's where you want to be. You want to be right there in the forefront, right there in their mind's eye. But that's how you keep going at the firm you're at. If you don't want to keep going at the firm you're at, then don't do those things.
So you being socially present, or I guess remotely present, right? That's
Right.
basically what you're saying.
hmm
how do we remain present in a remote world?
Right. Because you don't want the conversation to ever come up to say, where the heck is Dana?
Right. Or like, I haven't heard from Dana in a while. Yeah.
Right. Even though you're working your butt off 12 hours a day, getting all these things done, if they don't know you're doing it.
Do you guys utilize Microsoft Teams?
We do use Teams. We're switching over to Teams from Skype for Business. I really like Teams.
I love Teams. I'm a huge Teams fan.
There's a lot to Teams.
There is. It's like you kind of have like a OneNote facet in there as well.
It's got everything.
It's got everything. I love the
yeah.
chat capability in there. You can screen share, you can take control. When you
Right.
take control, you see like your little face, your image over your mouse. I love it. I'm all
It's
about
great.
it.
It's a wonderful thing.
And I think in a remote world, it really helps with that presence.
If Teams allowed us to record this podcast in different tracks, we would be using Teams to record this podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's how great Teams is. So Teams is important.
We should talk to them about that.
Yeah, we'll I'm sure we have a lot of influence on Microsoft.
Carl, how do you support your office in a remote way? You're remote, so this obviously probably doesn't change. So how do you how do you see people changing around you, maybe, or have there been challenges? Do we lose Carl?
No challenges. Everything is wonderful. Everything is awesome. I believe the song goes.
Everything is cool when you're part of a team.
It's a little bit different because my role is a little bit different. My role was designed to be a remote role, and when a lot of the people that I'm supporting are also remote, it's a bit of a difference. So I've stepped a little bit away from the BIM manager, BIM support role that you see that I did for Imagine, and what you guys are doing now with how you do it, and I'm more on a technical support role for a sales side. So that just means being present for calls, which is always going to be a remote situation. We don't use Teams. We are a heavy Slack organization. So everything's done 24/7 through messages and pop-ups and on the Slack end of things. So that's the other thing. Whether you're physically in front of your computer, at least with me, if I don't have my computer, I have my phone, so I've the ability to answer questions via Slack pretty much any time that I need to. Which I think kind of brings back to what Bill was talking about, if everybody was in the East, he would make sure that he got up bright and early in Pacific time to be part of that scenario. I challenge that this issue that we're going through when we're dealing with so many people working remotely is going to open a lot of people's eyes to understand that there are a lot of people that work in a firm that don't have to have those kept hours. They have X amount of information they need to get done, and if they work best at 3 o'clock in the morning, why not let them be productive when they need to be productive? Not get up at 5 in the morning so that they're physically sitting at a keyboard because someone says that 8 o'clock in Eastern time makes sense. Now, if you're doing a support role where you're supporting other people, then maybe that needs to be. But the videos that you're talking about, Bill, that are very helpful to the organization, if you do those in the evening, your evening time, or the out east evening time, and they're posted for when they come in first thing in the morning, I would still say that's beneficial. They don't have to be in place. So I think that's one of the things that people are going to find from what we're going through now is that there's a lot of roles that can allow people to have that flexibility, and the flexibility of working from home when it's not mandated on you like some of it is now gives you that work-life balance. You have to go to the dentist, you have to go to the doctor, you have to get your car fixed, walk the dog, whatever. So you take a couple hours off in the middle of the day, but then you work in the evening, and it's just a more civilized way to work, I think, than what we might be used to from back in the 50s.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% on that. But if your firm, Carl, is already set up that way, my firm is not. So I need to wait for my firm to evolve in that direction before I start taking those liberties.
Tell them to catch up, Bill.
And that's what I was getting at. And they'll catch up.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, your firm's going to catch up. But don't assume they're caught up.
But I think what Carl and maybe even myself have been arguing is that these types of times, this particular situation is going to force us into that even faster, right?
Yeah, and it is. It is. And then hopefully when people are listening to this podcast 9 months in the future or whenever they're listening to it, are saying, "What the hell are you talking about? That's the way my firm is now. It wasn't 9 months ago, but it is
Hmm.
today." And that's great. That's great. But today, you need to make sure that you're following the culture of your firm.
Absolutely. I mean, we have offices all over the nation, and the
Right.
culture in DC is different than in San Francisco.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's really down to your specific office and as to how that all kind of behaves and
Yeah.
performs.
They're probably much more laid back in DC than in San Francisco.
You think so? I think I'm pretty laid back girl myself, but
I think so too. I think you're great.
Wonderful, in fact.
Wonderful,
oh,
wonderful. All right, let's talk a little bit about the technology before our time runs out and Carl kicks us off.
That's right. We're coming up on that Aubin.
On that Aubin, we're currently using remote desktop is what we're doing today because our firm really isn't geared up for 300, 400 people working remotely. So we went out and got a bunch of laptops and we're doing remote desktop now so they can reconnect back to their computer at the office and do work. I think we've all realized that that's not a sustainable way if we're going to be continually working remotely. But it was a way that we could do it overnight. We ended up we were lucky enough to have our new internet line in, not connected but ready to go. So we got another VPN boxy thing and plugged it in, and then we had two VPN boxes with 2 gigabit lines coming into the office. So now we have all the bandwidth that we need to do this kind of work. But I'm if this continues to be working remote, I don't think remote desktop is really sustainable. I think we're going to need to go to a cloud solution like a BIM 360 and things like that. What's your thoughts and what are you doing now?
Well, as I mentioned, we're doing all BIM 360, and luckily with Smith Group, most of us have laptops that they issue to us. So,
Oh, okay. See, we're not that way. We're mostly desktop.
right. And I was really lucky at my last firm, and I had both, and I was able to remote into my own personal desktop, which
Mm-hmm.
was the best of both worlds. Just completely,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it's all the worlds. It's not both. It's you actually have them both.
Yeah.
So that was really hard for me to give up, but I don't know. I mean, Carl, what have you seen with Imagine It? Have you, from the technology standpoint, kind of seen how typical firms operate? I've mentioned in previous podcasts I'm not really keen on the hardware side of things.
There was a little bit of everything, and as Bill mentioned, and as Buck mentioned in the episode uh, that you'll hear in the future by the time comes out, talking about is that everybody does a little bit differently, and I've seen firms where everybody has their desktop, and that's driven by everybody coming to the office and work. People that have their super powered workstations, like I did with Imagine It, where it's the $8,000 laptop that weighs 2 tons that you carry around, but you can do everything with it. So there's kind of the bit and piece, but I've seen the people that have tried the desktop solution, whether it be remote desktop, Citrix version thereof, to do it that way, and everyone's always seemed to not be happy with that solution as a long term. There's a bit of a lag. I don't get the feedback that I want. The colors are off. Everybody kind of didn't really like that, and I think that's why a lot of people are moving towards the cloud-based solution, because you've got what you need locally. So your Revit, your local license, your information is stored in the cloud. You can share that thing back and forth. The problem that we're gonna eventually run up to there is that software as a service, when every software becomes a service. Instead of paying our $20 a month for our Netflix subscription, we're paying $3,000 a month because we're subscribing to everything. So at some point, that's going to become an issue. And I think everybody was sort of mentioning that with the whole Autodesk moving to all subscription all the time, no more network licenses. So,
Right.
what are you thinking on that side, Bill? Of somebody that's helping deal with 400 people dealing with licenses and stuff, um, how does that factor into it with the cloud versus the remote desktop?
Hi, this is Future Bill, editing for content.
Before Carl really does cut us off, what if I flip the switch completely and say,
Uh-huh.
what about the VDI, the virtual desktop
Uh-huh.
infrastructure? It's an infrastructure I've never worked on personally, but
Yeah.
it seems like a perfect solution so that you don't have to worry about the cloud, right? You just give everybody their crappy laptop. You don't even need a nice one, right?
Their
Because you
Right.
thin client, as we call it.
just
Right.
and you just access this other
Uh-huh.
desktop, and everybody can work on the server from wherever it wants to sit,
Right.
right?
I like the VDI idea, obviously, with the BIM9 stuff that I used to do. It's changed a lot. There are you can now, I think AU did Amazon for their cloud, whatever service that was. And that worked out. Those were pretty fast machines, but they had 10 gig coming into the building. Were you aware of that bandwidth they had coming in?
I didn't know how much they had.
Yeah, it was 10 gig, and so that's a lot of bandwidth. That worked out well. At Built, they had the HVE solutions doing
Yep.
their stuff. Now, granted, it went down every now and then, but I think that was the fact that those servers were abused and traveled a lot, and that's why we were seeing those kinds of problems at Built. I
In the
don't think it
labs and
was
such, you mean?
in the labs. I don't think it was their technology. I don't think it was their setup the way they did it. I think it was just those poor machines were just abused, and that's why we saw that. And they're coming into an unknown environment where they're like, okay, do we have real wires to connect people
Right.
with? We're going to
What are the
use
tables we're going to
Wi-Fi.
be sitting on?
What
Yeah.
are the tables? I need to tape down all the wires, and they're not in the walls where they're protected like they are in your office or you know. So there's a lot of variables involved in that technology. But when it worked great.
It,
I
it
uh I was very happy with the performance.
It certainly did, and in between I preferred the setup from the built folks as opposed to what they were doing with the AU solution.
Uh-huh.
When everything being equal and working, because they ran a zero client versus a thin client, which means
Right.
literally you just had to plug in the monitor and it was all good. But
Mhm.
both of them were far and away, in my eyes, better than a simple remote desktop.
Yeah, and they work great. We're looking at building one now at my firm to help with SketchUp because we use SketchUp as our schematic design software. And as we all know now, SketchUp doesn't run in remote desktop anymore. It's GPU only now. They took out the software GPU driver, so now it doesn't even work in remote desktop. So you have to have a BDI that has a graphics card.
Well,
So
it sounds
that's
like me, guys, that we're gonna have a part two on working remote, and I think maybe even we
yeah,
should just like compare the infrastructures of how we can save our stuff. Right? It's not even BIM. It's where do our PDFs live?
right,
Where does the project info live? Where do I save this
right,
email? You know?
uh-huh, right.
Whether it's VDI or VDA or remote desktop or cloud or
Teams or there's
yeah,
too many
team.
clouds to put this
There's
stuff
too
in.
many places. There's too many
Yeah, and
places.
that's why your IT department is having a hard time figuring out where to go. That's why IT departments block Box and Dropbox and places like that because there's too many choices and the data starts to get fragmented. And when your data is fragmented, nobody knows where it's at. And then that puts the firm at a disadvantage. or at risk for that matter.
Did we lose Bill?
Well, it sounds like a perfect cutoff to me.
I think so, and I think that that you brought up the VDI right at the end is like a nice little cliffhanger for
Yeah,
what
something else.